And today we have a very famous guy who you might already have read one of his books. We have with us Bill Boggs, who's an author, a talk show host, has an incredible career in entertainment, television, movies, ones you'll recognize. Bill's been on my show when I had Inside Out, and I wanted him back because he's got a great story. So right now I'm going to have introduce you to Bill Boggs. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, folks.
Up in New York.
Thank you. Yeah, right now I'm in Manhattan, and I'll be coming to glorious West Palm Beach in January, and I'll be down there for the entire winter.
Well, hearing the weather where you are, I think you're going to welcome the Sunshine State.
I'll be ready. Believe me, I love it down there. You know, in many ways, I have a more active social life out of Palm Beach and West Palm Beach than I do here in New York City.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. You know, the old New York isn't quite the same. It's going to get good again, I think. It's going to get better. But between the weather and some of the issues you're dealing with up there, Florida's probably a nice respite, both weather-wise and otherwise.
Well, I love the music scene in West Palm Beach and Boca. I'm always checking what's at the Kravitz Center. I've got tickets lined up for stuff. I would say if I had any hobby, Anita, it's going to live music. Mostly singers, sometimes orchestral music. I'm going to Carnegie Hall 2 times over the holidays.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Music has been driving my life and informing my life for as long as I can remember.
Well, you can kind of tell that by your spirit. You know, I've had the joy of having you on a couple of times because you always have a new book and you've always got something fascinating to say. And before we get to that, I just want you to take the time to brag a little bit, if you would, for me. I don't want to read your resume.
Difficult.
How about going back and giving me some of the highlights? Because reading a resume is pretty boring, and you're too exciting to do that for.
Well, you know something? Here's something that no one's ever seen before. I thought I'd bring out right now. There's a picture of me in the Army.
Wow.
I know. Well before my show business career. All right, I'll give you...
What rank?
Excuse me?
What rank were you in the Army?
How low can you go? That's how low I was.
Well, thank you for your service, no matter what.
You're welcome. Now, this was basically the Vietnam era, and my goal was not to go to Vietnam, but not to go to Canada either. So I was able to get in the Pennsylvania National Guard, and I went away for 8 months of basic training, and became a medic, an Army medic. And boy, I tell you, if anybody has an accident or something, the training's still with me. It's very good training. Anyway,
it's also not for the faint of heart.
No, not in the least for the family. In fact, in some classes, in the heat of in Fort Sam Houston, in the heat of summer, in the classrooms, looking at films of wounds and soldiers who were wounded. A couple of people did faint.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you went on to happier things for sure. Yes. So take us back a few years because you've got some really fun stuff.
All right. Here's how I got into show business. I've always wanted to do what I've done, essentially be an interviewer of people. My mother told me, and I don't remember this, I used to walk around the house when I was about 4 years old with a pencil interviewing people. So I'm one of those really lucky people who, with support of friends, a modicum of talent, and maybe some help from a higher power, was able to make my childhood dream came true. I essentially grew up to be a television talk show host. The show business career began because I spotted an opportunity. I was after graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, which is my alma mater, but it was much easier to get in then. I was working at a Fortune 500 company, Armstrong Cork Company, in Lancaster, PA, because they had recruited me and they offered me salary, more money than I think my father had made, in a year. And so I took that job, but within 2 weeks, I was really bored. I hated it. It was like writing corporate press releases and stuff. And 2 of my coworkers, one of whom was named Jay Tarsus, one of the funniest people I knew, started writing comedy routines, which I discovered when I was walking down the hallway to go to the bathroom once. And they had a couple secretary is hysterical, right? I said, "What is this?" And they told me they're running. I said, "Do another one." And I did this routine about a toll taker on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and a ticket going back and forth. It was like Nichols and May. This is a period of time when a lot of comedy was sketch comedy, like Stiller and Meara, Rowan and Martin, Nichols and
Right.
May.
Real comedy.
Yeah, it was cool. And I said, "Come back to my office for a second." I had a blinding revelation, a coup de foudre, as the French would say. And the revelation was, I'll try to book them around in like these coffee houses and little clubs and colleges. And if it catches on, we'll quit our jobs and get out of here. And I'm happy to say, approximately 6 months later, they made their first television appearance on the Merv Griffin Show. Patchett and Tarsus. They would go on, once I separated from them amicably, to write for Mary Tyler Moore and Bob Newhart and write a couple of Muppet movies.
Oh,
So
wow.
they were extremely talented.
Evidently, because those were
Yeah,
great shows.
So that got me into show business. And then a woman in Philadelphia made me an offer I couldn't refuse. She wanted me as associate producer of a new morning talk show that was going to have a host and then 5 regulars during the week each day. And she had seen what I had done with the comedy team. She had sensed something about me. And so she said, "Look, I'd like you to be the associate producer of my show, of the new show. We're going to have a host and 5 people who are regulars." I said, "Debbie, I really appreciate that, but I'm scheduled to move to California with the comedy team, and I think we're going to really end up doing very well out there." "No, I think you're making a mistake. I think you'd be a great producer. I just sense it." I told her the same excuse again, and she said the words that changed the course of my career. "What would it take for you to stay?" I said, "Okay." I know they wouldn't make me the host of the show, but I knew my public speaking ability, which has been my main gift all my life, that and imagination, writing.
Right.
I said, "If you let me be one of those 5 regulars, and I don't want to audition, I don't want someone to say, 'Why is this guy who's manager of a comedy team trying to be on television?' I know I can do it." She gave me the job. Tom and Jay went to California, and that's how I got on television. KYW TV, 1619 Walnut Street, Philadelphia, PA, my hometown.
KYW, I grew up with in Cleveland. I lived in a little town outside of Cleveland. And Joe Finan was a DJ who we all loved, by the way, on
Those old
KYW.
DJs. Yeah.
And Biggie Wilson. Goes back a couple years.
In Philadelphia, we had High Lit and Joe Niagara. Joe Niagara called himself the Rockin' Bird. And High Lit, these guys were so cool. You know, you're in high school listening to rock and roll
Yeah,
music.
yeah.
They're playing it. Oh, boy.
Actually, to sidetrack just a minute, we have Scott Shannon with this station now. And
Good man.
Fabulous. We are so blessed. He moved to South Florida. I think he's still doing a simulcast. He was with CBS True Oldies for years and is a Hall of Famer. Actually, I interviewed him for my show. I don't miss. I put him on, leave him on all day because he's like you. He's got music to play, but he always has a story to tell with it. And for those of you out there that have not tuned into 95.9 in Palm Beach and all the other channels between here and Key West, catch the Scott Shannon Show. It's well worth your time. Anyway, Bill, KYW is what brought that to mind.
What would you like? I'm ready with anything.
Oh, you were KYW was your stopping point.
Yeah,
so
okay. Well, KYW was my start, and after like a year and a half of being, I made a character for myself. I was on every Friday, and I was Mr. Weekend, telling people what's happening around town, what's going on in New York, things they could do on the weekend. And after about a year and a half of this, it was like playing for the Phillies, but only get in one game a week. So I made a New Year's resolution that I would go anywhere in America to get my own talk show. And I just told everybody I know I'm looking for an opportunity. And an ABC affiliate in High Point, North Carolina was going to start a new talk show, morning talk show, replace something called Farm, Home, and Garden. I heard about it. I called them. I went down. I auditioned, and I got the job. And
for Farm, Home, and Garden?
No, they wanted to replace Farm, Home, and Garden
Ah,
with, which is a local show with no 8 a.m. morning talk show. So I went down there, auditioned, I got the job. I named the show Southern Exposure with Bill Boggs. I produced it myself. I hosted it myself. I had a sense of what really would work down there. After I didn't go on the air right away. Had about a month and a half of promotion because I didn't know the area, and the station manager Phil Lombardo agreed with that concept of a teaser campaign, and we ended up going from a 0 rating with the Farm, Home, and Garden to beating the Today Show in one rating book. That was,
great
I would
name.
say, yeah, thank you. I think that it was probably the single, other than the second Spike book, probably the single greatest accomplishment of my life. It's going in there, never having been on the air, knowing I could do it, complete confidence in myself, and putting together a show that people really liked. And
Well, you were always, not only did you instinctively be able to do it, but you also, work your hobby. And you also
yeah,
had a love for it. So
that's
it
the
was a
truth,
natural.
100%.
And that's what
100.
makes people great, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Not that I'm great, but I agree
Oh,
with
I
the
think your
past.
track record's pretty great, Bill.
Thank
And
you.
so from Southern Exposure, love the name. What then?
Well, Southern Exposure got syndicated in the South, like the Phil Donahue show started in Cleveland.
Yep.
So there would have been reason to stay if Phil Lombardo, the original man who hired me, had stayed on and kept syndicating the show. It could have been like Phil Donahue of the South, but he left, and I really wanted to strike out for greater pastures. So I started auditioning around. I had 3 different offers. One was to do a talk show in Miami, one was San Francisco, and the other was New York. So I chose to come to New York, and the show was called Midday Live, and it had a host named Lee Leonard, and he was leaving, and they wanted a new host. So I auditioned, and Paul Noble, who now lives in West Palm Beach, and the management liked what I did, and they hired me, and I did that for 12 years
What kind of
while doing other stuff.
what kind of show was it?
Midday Live was a 90-minute live public affairs talk show, which meant that you had to handle local issues like union strikes and stuff, as well as the celebrities who were coming through. And this was between 1975 and 1986. During that period of time, major league celebrities like Kirk Douglas, Burt Lancaster,
Right.
Natalie Wood were coming through to promote things. Once Regis went on the air, they pretty much got siphoned off to be on Regis because Regis was on nationally. But that didn't really hurt. I was happy to leave the show after 12 years. But then, this is important, I think, anyway. I have a YouTube channel. It's been my dedication for the last several years, of which I've gotten tapes that were in boxes in the basement in my parents' house, digitized and put on the channel. And the channel is BillBoggsTV. Okay. Just go to YouTube. It's free. Subscribe, because every time we put something new on, like usually once a month, a little email goes out. We're not pestering anybody, but there are interviews on there with Roy Cohn and Gore
Oh,
Vidal
wow.
debating each
Say it
other.
again. YouTube, Bill Boggs TV.
Bill Boggs TV. Bill Boggs TV on YouTube. And I encourage people to subscribe. You have 400 historic clips on there. Like Gore Vidal debating
Oh, wow. And
Roy
you know
Cohn.
what? We don't get to hear that kind of thing anymore. So,
No, well, only in podcasts. Ever since COVID, there's been more long form interviews on
yeah.
media than there were before.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
some of the people I mentioned before, like Natalie Wood, Kirk Douglas, Sean Connery, big Hollywood stars of the day, authors. There's a lot of things on there.
Well, I think everything old's new again because people need some normalcy. So this is like therapy. That's what I think about Scott Shannon and his 50s, 60s, 70s stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So how about what's your story is the title of your show, What other story would you like me to
Well,
talk about?
I want to take you. I mean, you've got such a heck of a resume, but let's highlight some of the things that were really fun, like that you didn't
Okay.
expect.
All right.
You're a storyteller, so I'm going to let you.
All right. I appreciate that. So the next big after I left Midday, I essentially just was tired of it. I did a show in Philadelphia for a while. And after I got tired of that, in other words, I had been interviewing people 3 years in North Carolina, 12 years at Midday, and I just wanted to change my life. So once
What
again,
did you do in Philly?
well, that's what I'm getting to.
Oh,
I started in Philadelphia, and then after I left Midday, I went back to Philadelphia after a year because I had to earn a living as a talk show host. But I was constantly repeating myself. I mean, the fourth time I interviewed the Chippendales in my career is what did it for me. I got the mic. I'm talking to the guy. I'm looking at this shaved, greasy chest, asking the same stupid questions I asked the last three times. And I said, I've got to get out of here, baby. So I went from there to be the executive producer of the Morton Downey Jr. show. And everybody thought, oh, nice guy, Bill Boggs. What's he doing with this madman, Morton Downey Jr.? I loved it. It also practically tripled my salary. I never made those giant bucks, that national hosts are making. So it was good to make a big buck. I love Morton Downey Jr. Today is his birthday, I believe, and so I did that. And then after that, I went to Court TV because the show went off the air. And after Court TV, I had a very interesting period. I worked for WNBC as an anchor of Weekend Today in New York. And when I left that, a classmate, Matt Blank, called me and said, I think we can use you on Showtime because they'd always see me, the Showtime people who were broadcasting the big, important championship fights would always see me at the fights. So for 6 years, from the time that Iron Mike Tyson got out of prison until his defeat by Lennox Lewis, I was doing a program called Championship Boxing Report Update, which was promoting all the pay-per-views fight. I would be on 5-6 times a week. I was in Vegas. I was in Mexico City. I was in
oh my
England.
gosh!
It was a great job. And at the same time, I was on the Food Network. So I had this period
You
of
were on the
real,
Food Network
yeah, see,
cooking.
I was on the Food Network 10 years. 10 years. Nobody remembers it. But I helped launch the Food Network. I had this show, Food News and Views, which was the only existing news report about chefs, food, recipes. And the early days of the Food Network were one
Wow.
of the most creative times in my career and the career of everybody who was working there because it's like the Wild West. I could go out with my own little video camera and shoot something, come back in with the editor, edit it. And so, what the Food Network, everything was like a chef behind the table, right? Emerald behind the table, Sarah
Yeah.
Moulton behind the table, David
Bam.
Rosengart behind the table. And they wanted to do something that was different than that. And I had this idea from both when I was at Midday and Weekend Today in New York, where I interviewed people while we were having lunch. And that's, in fact, the only thing I've ever invented in my TV career is the concept of eating and being on television and being interviewed at the same time. So I said, look, I think I can do something that you really like. What is it? Well, I gave him the idea. How are you going to book people? I said, well, that's what I've been doing all my life. Oh, I'll give it a try. And three people I knew personally, Matt Lauer, who's off to the side,
Oh wow.
Bill Cosby, who's off to the side. This is like a case if you're indicted, you're invited. And Whoopi Goldberg, who's going strong. Matt, Whoopi, and Bill.
What a
Awesome.
combination.
I'd love to help you shoot a pilot. So Cosby did the pilot. And that was pretty good coming in that year, whichever it was, 90, something like that. No, yeah, but 92. 92. So that's how I got on the Food Network. And then from
Have,
there, that slowly petered out. You know what happened? I was at a place 10 years, and they just wanted younger people. So they replaced the original team with younger people, and that's
That
it
keeps
ever
happening,
since.
doesn't it? We're going to get to your book, but I wanted you to. You mentioned Philadelphia. Did you ever meet Marcia Rose? Did you ever see her show?
Oh, I worked with Marcia Rose at KYWTV.
Well,
Absolutely.
I have a funny story. Every year for about 3 years or 2 years, the 2 years Ed and I lived in California, they would call and ask if Ed were coming to New York, would he be on the show? And it just his schedule never was, allowed it. So the secretary said, well, he and his wife are coming, and his wife could do it. And they said, well, we'll take her. So I was on the Marcia Rose show, and she and I stayed friends for a very long time. She was absolutely delightful. So that was my, we can't get Ed,
Yeah,
but we'll take her story.
good woman. She was a reporter for the station,
She was
among other things.
outstanding interviewer.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
And Tom Snyder was on at the same time
Oh,
Marcia
Ed
Rose
did
was
Tom
working
Snyder's
there.
show. I was in the
Yeah.
audience. Yeah.
So that
Interesting.
was a lot of talent came out of KYW. The Mike Douglas show was in the basement, and I'll tell you a story. It's not a pretty story, but it shows you how vicious show business can be. So during the summer of whatever it was, 72, something like that. That was 69, whatever. During the summer, we created a new show. Remember, I said, Debbie Miller said, what would it take for you to stay? And
Yeah.
the show was hosted by Bob McLean, and I was associate producer and on once a week as Mr. Weekend. And Bob McLean was a ruddy face, 34-year-old guy, brown hair, a real Irish looking face. And he looked a little bit like Mike Douglas, a little bit. Now, Mike Douglas is a huge star, syndicated show, making millions of dollars, and they're shooting that in the basement of KYW. So our show with McLean came on during the summer. Douglas comes back from a summer break, and in the lobby, he sees this new live show, McLean and Company, and there's Bob McLean, and it looks like him. He thought, but wait, he's 20 years younger. So he panicked and went to management, and this is what happened. Christmas, Eve Day, we all had these gifts on the staff we're giving to each other, and McLean is there in the office. We're all happy. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And he gets a call to go up to see management, thinking he's going to get a bonus, and he comes back completely crestfallen, face drained, white, and starts putting the things from his desk in shopping bag. What happened? They fired me. They fired me. Why?
Wow.
Well,
Looks
the
too much
reason
like Mike
why,
Douglas.
I got the reason from Roger Ailes, who was also working at KYWTV. This was a big talent pool. Yeah, Douglas didn't like him. He had him fired. He was threatened by the fact that he was younger. And that's a brutal story. So
Wow.
Debbie Miller and I walk him to the front door, and he's got his coat on and his 2 bags of stuff, and it's snowing. It's the day before Christmas, and we watched him walk off into the snow to go home and tell his wife and children he had been fired. And I turned to Debbie, we're both very young at the time, and I said, what the hell kind of business are we getting involved in here?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
brutal.
Scrooge. That's a modern day Scrooge story. So, on a happier note, you have several books. Two of which I've read. One of which I've read. I've fallen in love with your English Bull Terrier, and your
Thank you.
latest book is about him, Spike
Yes.
Unleashed.
It is Spike Unleashed. This is what I've been doing with my life since 2016, when my last TV show went off the air, which was called My Generation, produced by the AARP. Very good show. We kept getting nominated for Emmys and beaten by Martha Stewart. I said, I'm standing in my living room. I'm standing in my living room here, and I thought, geez, I'm 74 years old or whatever it was. Nobody's coming after me to be on TV anymore. I'm going to change my headset about what I do with my life. And I said, I'm going to be a writer. Oh, I had already written 2 other books, a romantic love story and a self-help book called Got What It Takes. That got very good reviews. In fact, Renee Zellweger optioned at first sight, several years after it was published. But this time, I had an idea about a dog observing society, an English Bull Terrier. I've had a couple of them. They're very funny dogs.
They
A
are.
dog observing society as not a member of the human race who has an acute sense of satire. And satire is a combination of exaggeration and ridicule. And I sat down to write it, Anita, and it was like a miracle. The voice of the dog sitting here at this desk just came through me. It was phenomenal. And that led to the first book, The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog, and then this is the sequel. You do not have had I consider this the best single work of my life.
Well, now I'm sorry. I'm sorry for two reasons. You're not in the studio today, but I read the first one because you brought it with you.
Yeah, you read The Adventures of Spike the Wonder
Yeah,
Dog.
funny, great book.
It's hard to get people to read books, Anita. People don't read like they used to. I mean, that is really the truth.
But you know what, Bill? I'm hearing more and more people say to me, I remember you and we had lunch a few years ago when you were in Palm Beach, and I mentioned to you that that a reporter had cocked me into doing a book and done an overview, and it kind of just sat there. Well, I can tell you in my audience, it got picked up last July. It'll be out in January. And thank you. And the name of the book, which hopefully is funny, because it's a memoir, it's just stories, is You Don't Look Like an Astronaut's Wife, because people used to say that to me, so the collaborator thought it was a great name for a book. My point being is that I'm getting more of my friends saying, Anita, you know what? I don't want to read it on a tablet. I want to pick up the book. And people are copying more reports now and holding them and reading them. Because
all this is good.
I think it's getting better.
I mean, I'll tell you, I have close friends that haven't read both my books, and yet the books the books have gotten excellent reviews. I mean, Brian Cox from Succession, the book is an absolute delight. In such a
Are you doing any book signing down here?
If I'm invited, I would do it. Bob Costas, Old Dog. Not really. New Tricks, plenty. Alan Zweibel, the comedy writer, whom I'll be interviewing at the Ben Hotel as part of their Cocktails and Culture series, said, quote, this book is great. So Spike Unleashed, it's a good Christmas gift. What's better than giving the gift?
Your book, your first book was just delightful. Spike Unleashed.
Yes, Spike Unleashed.
Well, it's kind of like its author.
Bill
Boggs Unleashed.
I'm unhinged. I'm not unleashed. I'm unhinged.
Maybe that's the name of your next book, Bill. Bill Boggs Unhinged. That could be very funny, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I'm thinking about writing a memoir of stories like you just mentioned about yourself. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll call it Boggs Unhinged.
This was an accident that had happened. The collaborator, that's all he does is at memoirs, and he had gotten the overview from the man that I had do the overview, and he sent it out to I don't know how many writers or editors, and it had been in his files for a couple years, and I don't know, it was a couple years ago that I had lunch with you and talked to you about it, and he called me one day and said, I've just read your overview, and I'm a collaborator, and I would love to do your book. And so we went through a couple months of talking back and forth, and he's delightful. He only does memoirs. It's a small company, but he has a couple bestsellers.
Oh, I'd like to have his contact information. You know,
be happy to. But here's the funny part: after we signed up, and I do the conversation with him 2 hours, 3 times a week. I said to him, you know, Rod, I never asked where you were from. And he said, and I'm from a small town in Ohio by the name of Medina. And he said, well, you're not going to believe this. And I said, Medina, Ohio? He said, no, that would be a stretch. I'm from Cape Canaveral.
Wow. Wow.
And so when you come down, I'll have to share the book with you.
I'd like that. Yeah,
I thought it was going to be a paperback, and we started that way. And a couple months ago, he said, No, we're going for a full book. You've got it's stories, and
Oh, I'm very happy for you. That's really interesting.
yeah,
I'm really
and I'll be more
that's
than
really
happy to
good.
introduce you to him. He's delightful.
Yeah,
Totally, yeah,
I'd like to meet him,
he
and
does some nice work.
I'd like to see you while we're down there, while I'm down there,
Well,
and
please give me a call. Same phone number. Haven't moved. Still here. Going to do
all
some
right.
book signings here when the book comes out.
Okay.
So
I have to double check if I have your number. If not, I will speak to Selena and I will get it.
absolutely, would love to see you, Bill.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know. I'm looking at Iggy to tell us what we need to do next. Oh, so now you can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. This shares some stuff because you are so darn good at that and entertaining. And I've got lots of people out there that you can entertain.
Well, I'll tell you a story about Frank Sinatra. How's that?
Ah, there you go.
Most that people hopefully still remember Frank Sinatra. I mean, he died like 20
This
years ago.
audience would remember Frank
He's
Sinatra.
already, yeah, that's good. So when I was 17, it was a very good year actually.
Yeah.
I I went to the 500 Club where Sinatra was performing in Atlantic City and snuck in the back door dressed as a busboy because the guests at the hotel where I was working in Ocean City to the south, they were frantically trying to get tickets to see Sinatra at this relatively small nightclub. And I went in there dressed as a busboy, and I mean, it's one of my really notable stories because my friend and I, who snuck in the back door through the kitchen, we found that the shows were 9, 11, and 1. He was doing 3 shows a night. So we
Wow.
figured we'll go to the 11. So we snuck in at about 10 minutes before 11. And the last guests from the first show, the 9 o'clock show, were just leaving. But we were in, right? We were dressed as busboys. We spoke the same language busboys spoke back in 1960, English. And we just started setting up tables, moving around, pretending to work, which was like a good preview of adult life. And then a comedian came on, Buddy Lester, and the place was, I had never been in a nightclub. Women with low plunging gowns, men with giant cufflinks, every other person smoking, they're drinking. I thought, and we stood in, in front of a pillar, right? And as soon as the lights went down, we took off the busboy coats and put on long ties so we looked like customers, dropped the coats to the floor. And then, yeah, Sinatra, I really thought it would be impossible to capture this audience. It was just so nuts. He came out and he had the audience in the palm of his hand
Oh, I'm sure.
instantly. And I really would say I fell in love with Frank Sinatra like that night. He became a huge part of my life. And this end of the story, I don't normally tell this, was after this night I started having very pleasant recurring dreams a couple times a year, not every night, that I was sitting in a chair talking to Frank Sinatra. It was always very pleasant. Sometimes it was Frank, other times it didn't look like Frank, but it was always Frank. Maybe 3 times a year I had that dream. So fast forward to the Easter weekend, 15 years later. I'm headed to Las Vegas to see a girlfriend of mine who has said, come on out for the weekend. Elvis is at the Hilton, Sinatra's at Caesar's Palace. We'll go to see them both on the same night. Okay. She got Elvis tickets. I had contacts through Sammy Davis to get Sinatra tickets, and we went. So after, wait a second. Oh, I forgot to tell you something. The morning that I made that trip was a Friday. I had to do Midday and then fly to Vegas real fast. I woke up in the morning and I had had a really vivid vision of this dream of sitting in a chair talking to Frank Sinatra. It was so vivid. I said to myself, this is like a precursory dream. I'm going to meet Frank Sinatra this weekend and he's going to come and be on Midday with me. And it happened.
Wow.
Yep,
Wow.
it happened.
How did you know Sammy Davis?
Oh, well, quick story on that one. I was working while managing a comedy team. I was working at the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater again, as assistant dean of men 4 days a week. And then I always took Friday off. And one day the phone rang. It was a guy named, this is a brutal story, but has a good ending. It was a guy named Ken Roberts, who was producing nightclub type shows for colleges called University Concert Productions. So the question is, would you like to have Sammy Davis Jr. on campus? So I said, yes, we'd love that. That would be great. But in order to get this done, we had to go to the student union at Penn. So the other young assistant dean and I go to the student union, very excited about this. And two of the guys that were like really snobby guys from prep school, stuff like that. And one of them said, quote, get ready, we don't want that N-word on the campus.
Oh, gosh.
That's what I know. So
God, we did have days like that, didn't we?
That was it. So Paul and I go back, and we were really pissed off. So we went to the Interfraternity Council. We both had been presidents of our fraternities, and we were involved with them a little bit. And we got the Interfraternity Council to sponsor Sammy Davis. Up to that point, only the Student Council was allowed to sponsor any shows on campus, but there's no rule against it. So when the Student Council found out about this, they pilloried Paul Noble and I. They dug up our transcripts. There were articles in the Daily Pennsylvanian about how we weren't doing a good job, all this stuff. So the night comes, the Spectrum in Philadelphia at Penn is filled with people. It's a show in the round. There's an orchestra down here. And I really hadn't met Sammy. I was in the dressing room. I was in the green room next to the dressing room, and he was in that room. And someone said, Ken Roberts said, Sammy has no idea what you guys went through to get him here. And Sammy heard this, and he came out. And I told him, and he just gave me the biggest hug.
What a great story.
Yeah.
Did you stay in touch with him?
All through the years.
Really?
I was just on Bob Merrill's radio show yesterday, talking about Sammy Davis. Yesterday would have been his 99th birthday.
Oh wow! So yes, what a talent! Oof.
Oh, he really is the world's greatest entertainer. He can do anything.
Yeah.
But a huge singing voice. Sammy Davis had a giant voice.
I saw him in concert twice. I saw Sinatra 3 times, and I saw Johnny Mathis twice. My 3, and Tony Bennett was the all-time. I mean, Sinatra's favorite singer.
Yep.
I think Bublé may be the closest now coming up. He's good, and it's kind of nice to hear his stuff.
I find him derivative. Not original. I find him derivative. I listen to him every once in a while, and it just doesn't sound authentic to me. My favorite male singer is right now in the world? Tom Jones.
Tom Jones.
He's unbelievably powerful voice. Is still all right there, maybe in a slightly lower register. He was at the Beacon Theater here, Beacon Theater here in New York.
Maybe we'll have him here at the Kravis.
Oh, the place would go wild. I mean, he really delivers the goods.
See, Tony Bennett did that. He played the Kravis when he was 90, and
I saw that show.
Did you? Yeah. Where he put down the microphone. Put down the piano, stopped, and he sang a cappella. Oh, jeez, it was just terrific. And Iggy, my producer, tells me, "Boy, did this go fast, Bill." Welcome back to Florida soon. Hope you have a wonderful holiday and a great way to start the new year in the Sunshine State. And give me a holler. We'd love to see you. But thank you for taking the time today to share such great stories. I mean, I could have you on every day, just about, for sure. And
first off, thank you. You're very kind to me. You make me feel comfortable, and you somehow elevate my mood, which is very good.
No, there's nothing to elevate. I mean, your life is exactly what's your story. You really fit. And it's been a pleasure, and I know I'm going to get a lot of good likes from the audience. So stay well, and we'll see you in January, I hope. In the meantime, I'm going to have to say goodbye to everybody, but just please tune in. I'll see you next Tuesday from 7 to 8. Thanks for joining the conversation on What's Your Story. And as always, I'm Anita Mitchell, wishing you green lights and blue skies. Bye-bye.